Moving into a new house often means acclimating to unfamiliar settling noises. A young couple, Sarah and David, had just settled into their dream home on the outskirts of town. The house had 3 floors, but no basement. Their master bedroom was located on the ground level. Almost immediately, their peaceful new life was shattered. In the dead center of the night, they began hearing strange, muffled sounds coming from directly below them. Sarah initially dismissed it as the plumbing or the foundation settling. But as the days passed, things began to change in the morning. Interior doors that the couple were certain they had closed before bed were now standing wide open. Sarah's massive walk-in closet, which she always secured, was consistently unlatched. Assuming it was some kind of severe draft, one night they made a point of sealing every window and door in the entire house. The next morning, they woke up to find every single interior door propped open, including the wife's closet. Panic setting in, the couple decided to stay up the next night, listening and waiting. Around 1:30 a.m. the noises returned, much louder and more visceral than before. It wasn't scratching, it was the heavy thud of objects being dragged and pushed, followed by faint, agonized moaning. David bravely headed down to the lower family room, pressing his ear against the drywall. The sound wasn't coming from the adjacent room, it was coming from inside the wall, lower down than the floor he was standing on. Later, after retreating to their bedroom, Sarah was shaken by a horrifying sight in the master closet. She pointed, silently crying. David turned his flashlight toward the closet. A secret, perfectly concealed hatch door had been propped open in the wooden floor of the closet. David shined the beam down. It revealed a hidden wooden ladder descending far down into the dark earth, leading to a hidden room no one knew existed. Sarah called 911, screaming at the dispatcher, while David grabbed a large machete from the garage and began descending the ladder. When he reached the bottom, he found a light switch. The hidden chamber was furnished. There was a crude table, a rickety chair, and a filthy small cot in the corner. But the most terrifying detail was what lay on the concrete floor. Dozens of children's toys scattered across the room. A blood-curdling scream came from upstairs. Sarah. Someone was violently kicking the locked bedroom door above him. David scrambled back up the ladder as fast as he could. By the time he reached the top, the intruder had managed to break a large hole in the doorframe. David stared through the opening, locking eyes with a severely disturbed, dirty man. The man was smiling, but his eyes were red and full of rage. Frightened by the machete in David's hand, the stranger fled out the front door into the night. They later discovered the man had been living in that hidden underground bunker long before the couple even bought the house. The isolating vastness of a desert beach at night can amplify any sense of dread. A young couple was enjoying an evening together at Cedar Beach in New York. The problem was that the isolated beach closed officially at 9:30 p.m., leaving them miles away from any major civilization, with nothing but the ocean and the dunes surrounding them. Instead of leaving, they decided to take a romantic night walk through the cold, wet sand, hoping to avoid any park rangers. For the first half of their walk, they were entirely alone. The only sounds were the crashing waves and the crisp wind. They walked for over a mile before deciding to turn back to the car. They had been walking for about 20 minutes on their return trip when both of them simultaneously noticed something disturbing on the sand. There were more than 2 pairs of footprints. Their own older tracks were washed away by the tide, but there were 2 new, incredibly fresh sets of footprints that had appeared on the wet sand. They were following the couple's path. The tracks seemed to set off up away from the water, heading toward the large, tall dunes where a person could easily hide. They tried to rationalize it, thinking it might be another couple enjoying a late-night stroll, but they had not seen or heard a single person for the entire time they had been walking. Deeply spooked, the husband used the flashlight app on his iPhone to scan the surrounding dunes, yelling out into the night to see if anyone was there. There was no reply. Assuming someone might be lurking near the cluster of large public garbage cans near the parking lot tunnel, the husband walked over, shining his light, telling his wife to wait there. The garbage cans were empty. Thinking they were safe, he shined the light further down the path, illuminating the mouth of a long concrete tunnel that led to the parking lot. He moved closer to peer inside. He immediately clicked the light off. Huddled deep inside the tunnel were two figures. They didn't look entirely human. He couldn't make out many features, only that they were completely naked, severely hunched over like naked creatures, and huddled together. The glimpse of their skin was the most disturbing part. It appeared medium dark, matching a Caucasian tone, but looked severely flaky and wrinkly, almost matching the texture of dry, cracked earth. Terrified of what he was looking at, the husband didn't utter a word. He practically grabbed his wife's hand and forced her to sprint with him blindly through the deep sand, not stopping until they reached their car 5 minutes later, completely out of breath. He reported the sighting to the authorities, but have been returning weekly to try and find the creatures once more. Working as a night janitor in a massive, sprawling high school is an extremely isolating job. Because there isn't much need for multiple people after hours, 95% of the time, the janitor is the only one working the night shift. To manage the unsettling silence of the empty building, the janitor on this specific night had set up multiple large radios throughout the hallways, blasting loud music to create a sense of presence. He always started his rounds in the ground floor classrooms and worked his way up to the second floor. The upstairs of the high school was shaped like a massive U. To go around to the other side of the building, there was only one long hallway that connected the two parallel wings. The janitor was alone, mopping a social studies classroom near the front of the U. He looked up from the floor, glancing across the U-shaped gap toward the opposing wing of the school. Every single classroom light in that wing was turned off. He was strict about shutting them off to save electricity. He froze. As he watched, the lights to one of the classrooms across the school abruptly clicked on. His entire body broke into a cold sweat. Then, a figure stepped into the brightly lit classroom window. The person stopped and stared directly across the U-shaped gap, locking eyes with the janitor through the window. Paralyzed by what he was witnessing, the janitor couldn't decide what to do: confront them, run away, or call the police. The stranger in the window appeared to be in his 30s or 40s, with a large beard and facial hair. Then, the man slowly raised his hand and began a deliberate, mocking, slow wave directly at the janitor. Horrified, the janitor violently yanked the blind shut to block his view. While trying to catch his breath and sort out his options, he decided to take a second peek through the blinds. The light in the classroom across the school was off. Panic exploded in his chest. He knew the person wasn't leaving the building. They were now moving through the dark connecting hallway on their way toward his wing of the school. The janitor grabbed his keys, scrambled down the stairs, and bolted out the back exit of the high school, abandoning his job and equipment. When police reviewed the security camera footage the next morning, they discovered the man had emerged from the high school's basement hours earlier, wandering around. The creepiest detail was that the camera showed him going back down into the basement and never coming out. He was never found, leaving the janitor to wonder what kind of hidden rooms or exits exist beneath the school's architecture. Living on an isolated farm ranch with your grandparents should provide a peaceful life. For a teenage boy who had just been kicked out by his parents, staying with them was the only option. His bedroom was on the ground floor. The room was standard, albeit with a pungent old person smell, and littered with his grandmother's numerous religious relics, and a massive painting of Jesus staring at him while he slept. Strange things didn't start happening until the second week. One evening, he got home late from his job at the corner store in town. It was completely dark out. While unlocking the front door of the ranch house, he heard a rustling sound coming from the deep crops in the field right next to the house. Assuming someone was trying to steal his grandfather's produce, he tiptoed closer to the edge of the crops, staying away from fallen leaves to remain silent. There was indeed someone in the fields, but they weren't walking. They were crawling aggressively on all fours, sneaking around between the rows of crops. Terrified of what he was looking at, he went back inside and woke up his grandfather. The old man was furious, grabbing his heavy-duty rifle and marching out the front door, screaming, "If I ever catch you here on my farm, I won't hesitate to blow your brains out." That seemed to be enough to scare off any trespassers. But the next night, things got stranger. Sarah was lying in bed at 2 a.m. She woke up to the sound of laughing outside her window. She looked over. Someone was standing right on the other side of the glass, staring directly into the bedroom at her. As she sat up, the figure smiled and walked away. Terrified, she told her grandfather again. The old man was deeply pissed. He stomped to his closet, pulled out his rifle, and stomped over to the front door with the teenager right behind him. He opened the heavy wooden front door. Immediately, a hand reached out from the dark, grabbed the grandfather's leg and violently yanked it. The old man tripped, crashing down hard on the stoop. The teenager didn't hesitate. He jumped onto the attacker, tackling the figure easily because they were already in a crouch position. The grandfather managed to get back up, grabbing his gun and pointing it directly at the guy's head. The teenager dialed 911. While on the phone with the sheriff, the teenager suddenly heard a horrifying scream. It was his grandfather. He dropped the phone, fearing the worst, and ran back to the stoop. His grandfather was on the ground, his hand clasped over his blood-soaked nose. He had been blindsided. Another person had come running from the shadows, shoved the elderly man to the ground, punched him violently in the nose, and then both intruders fled into the darkness of the crops before the teenager could even react. They had been outnumbered and ambushed on their own porch. The sheriff arrived, but found nothing. The grandfather immediately installed a heavy camera system aimed entirely at the crops. Proximity horror hits differently when you realize a threat is just inches away from where you sleep. A 14-year-old girl was fast asleep in her second-story bedroom on a school night. She had forgotten that she had homework due the next day that she hadn't even started. She woke up in a panic at exactly 1:15 a.m. and flicked her bedside lamp on to work on her assignments. The house was completely silent. The only sound was the scratch of her pencil against the paper. Suddenly, faint shifting and scraping noises erupted from inside the walls of her room. She stopped writing, and the sounds became more clear. It was as if something heavy was being pushed and dragged through the tight space between the studs. Right next to her bed was a small built-in storage closet with a large square wooden door that was secured to the wall. The noises suddenly became exaggerated, amplified. It sounded like something was running around inside that tight space, directly adjacent to her head. Terrified, the 14-year-old girl began screaming for her mother at the top of her lungs. Just as her mother and father entered the hallway outside her room, the small storage door on the wall popped off with a violent metallic sound. A figure emerged from the dark void, tumbling into the room. When the girl's father burst through the bedroom door, he was met with a horrifying sight. Standing in the middle of the room, covering the 14-year-old girl's mouth with his hand, was a very tall and overweight Caucasian man. The fight was over in a matter of seconds. The girl's father, a strong man fueled by adrenaline, landed a few brutal punches to the man's gut, taking him down immediately. When the police arrived and arrested the attacker, they made a sickening discovery. The man had 2 pairs of the girl's underwear tucked deep inside his pockets. He had been secretly living inside the tight framework of the house, monitoring the 14-year-old's moves for weeks before finally deciding to emerge.